This episode is brought to you by Granola, Brevo, Shopify, Blinkist, Strawberry.me, and Fabric by Gerber Life. If you're in back-to-back meetings and want to stay focused while still getting clear notes, try Granola totally free for 3 months at granola.ai/Kwame. To level up your marketing, head to brevo.com/anything and use the code anything50 to save 50% off your first 3 months. Ready to launch your business? Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/Kwame. If you want to stay sharp and get the core insights from thousands of nonfiction books in just 15 minutes, start your free trial at blinkist.com/Kwame. To take control of your career trajectory, go to strawberry.me/Kwame for 50% off your first coaching session. It's like therapy for your career. And finally, if you're a parent protecting your family's financial future, apply in minutes at meetfabric.com/Kwame. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states, prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Today's show is sponsored by Strawberry.me. Let me ask you something. Are you truly where you want to be in your career? Or are you waking up every day knowing that you're capable of more, but you're just not sure how to bridge that gap? Most successful people that I know, the ones that lead at the highest levels, don't figure it out in a vacuum. They have mentors and coaches guiding them. I've always said that the most important negotiation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. And for me, one of the toughest self-negotiations that I had to have was unlearning the belief that I could do it all by myself. Early on in my journey, I thought that I had to have all the answers, but I quickly realized that the fastest way to hit a ceiling is to work in isolation. It wasn't until I sought out mentors and professional coaching that I actually learned how to articulate my value and navigate the high-stakes pivots that got me where I am today. And that's why I'm such a believer in what Strawberry.me career coaching is doing. They're removing the guesswork and giving you a direct line to that same level of expertise. What I love about this service is that it gives you the clarity, strategy, and accountability that you need to turn your professional goals into reality. Whether you're trying to land a new job, advance in your current role, or transition into a completely new field, having expert guidance is a game changer. Instead of relying on guesswork or just waiting for the right time, professional coaching helps you to take control of your career trajectory. You'll identify the obstacles holding you back and develop a step-by-step plan that'll help you to move forward with total confidence. It's time to stop waiting. Go to strawberry.me/Kwame and get 50% off your first coaching session. That's strawberry.me/Kwame. It's like therapy, but for your career. Welcome to this masterclass edition of Negotiate Anything. With over 1,700 episodes featuring some of the world's brightest minds, we've carefully curated a couple of powerful conversations for you. What makes this so special is that you'll hear how different experts from different industries approach the same challenge in their own unique ways. Our goal is to give you multiple perspectives so you can build your own unique style. Success doesn't look the same for everyone, and in this masterclass, you'll see exactly why. Let's dive in. Amy, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, it is our pleasure. We're excited to have you, even though we were rescheduled a few times. So
it happens.
So how about you get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm a mediator. I've been mediating full-time for about 5 years after a 20-year career as a trial attorney, trying cases in employment, personal injury, and contracts disputes. And that tends to be where the focus of my practice is most of the time these days. But I love the shift, and I love helping people work through problems and move forward to resolution.
Fantastic. And where are you based?
I'm based out of the Boston area, but these days geography doesn't really matter because 99% of my work these days is over Zoom.
Nice. That makes sense. Now, actually, even before we get into the interview, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. What has been the biggest change for you going from being a litigator to a mediator?
Mindset. It really is challenging for someone who's trained as a lawyer to think in the way that an effective mediator needs to think. And that is basically, you don't have skin in the game when you're a mediator. If you've got skin in the game, there's a problem because your job is to be neutral and help the parties through things as opposed to be advocating for or against a particular position. So shifting that mindset from being an advocate to being somebody who's really a partner with the individuals who are going through conflict was the biggest change. And the people who worked with me very early on when I was doing practicums would tell you that I had the typical lawyer mindset where I wanted to come in and solve the problems. And that's not really what negotiation is all about.
That's great. And I think the big takeaway is that that mindset can be learned, right?
Yes, very definitely. It takes practice and it takes consciousness, but if you have those two things, you most definitely can learn to up your game.
Absolutely. Love it. Great. So before we get started, listeners, you know how it goes. We're going to give a quick roadmap to talk about the things we're going to address. So number one, we're going to talk about silence. It's been a while since we've talked about silence. Then we're going to go to number two, which is body language, how to read it, and then what to do with it. And then lastly, segmentation, which might be a new concept for a lot of our listeners. So I'm excited to jump into this. So where should we start when we're talking about silence?
Silence. Oh boy, it's a really interesting concept. And it's one that I really first started thinking about when I was sitting across from the car dealer the very first time I went to go buy a car. And I don't know if others have had this experience, but I found myself bargaining against myself because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. Whereas the dealer just sat there calmly and quietly, didn't say anything, and let me talk myself into the price that he had offered to sell me the car for. And that was really my first experience many years ago with the value of silence as a negotiating tool. Since then, I've really noticed that the person who sits back truly listens to what the other person is saying and allows the other person to bring out and bring forth more information is usually in the driver's seat in a negotiation.
Yes, and it's so counterintuitive. And but the thing that's interesting is that people will toss that around all the time. Oh, silence is an important part of negotiation. Silence, silence, silence. We hear that and we know that, but what makes it so hard for people to actually do it?
It's actually psychology, and there are a number of studies out there that show how difficult it is for us to, from a social perspective, a social norms perspective, to stay silent. And we view silence as awkward and uncomfortable, and we move in to fill that airspace because those silences, to most of us, feel very, very weird and very uncomfortable. So if we can learn to be comfortable with that silence and that quiet, we can actually gain a great deal of information. But it comes from very early stages. If you go to almost any societal gathering, any gathering of two or more people, there is an ebb and flow to the conversation in which there are very few pauses.
It's interesting. Okay, so it takes practice, and then we recognize that there's that psychological drive to fill that silence with something. And really, if you try to utilize silence, what you're going to notice is that there's going to feel almost like anxiety, some pressure building up in that moment when when you should be silent, but your body is saying, say something, anything, just anything. And so when we're at that moment where we recognize it's an important part of a negotiation and we should stay silent, but our body and mind are saying, no, say something. What is it that you do that helps you to maintain that discipline?
Breathe. That's the easiest and best answer I can give you is just take some time to focus on breathing and being present in the moment. And if I can do those two things, it allows me to get through those pauses without feeling like I'm doing nothing. Other people don't realize what I'm doing, but I'm concentrating on my breathing, and I'm doing it quietly and subtly. But it really gives me the ability to get through that time without feeling like I have to do something because I am doing something, and it's doing something that's putting me in a positive state in two ways. First of all, it's making me more aware of the moment and more present in the moment. And the other thing it's doing is it's giving me that diversion that my brain needs.
That's great. And you sound like somebody who meditates. Am I right?
I don't do it formally, but it's part of sort of my exercise practice and sort of my calming down. You know, when I'm lifting weights, which what I do for fun. I try to get my breathing down between sets, and that's sort of my contemplative time. And I find myself going to places that I never otherwise would expect to go. But it's not a formal practice, but it's fun. I enjoy it.
That's great. Yeah, it's formal enough. It works,
Yeah, it
right?
does.
That's great. Yeah, I started meditating years ago, but off and on, way more off than on. So
Mhm.
once I started to use the Headspace app, it really helped just to make it more of a ritual. But you're
Mhm.
right, in the gym, taking time to breathe, sometimes I just say, all right, 5 breaths between sets, that would help. And just getting into that habit of focusing on your breathing more during your day, it'll become more natural for you to do it in that moment. Because
Exactly. Yep.
really, when you think about it, with negotiation, conflict resolution, all of these types of things, meditation too, they're not natural things to do, because your body and your mind are really trying to compel you to do something else, and that something else is usually not the most persuasive thing in the moment.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, our natural compulsion as humans is to win. And that often results in our moving forward aggressively instead of deliberatively. And deliberate action, 9 times out of 10, is going to beat that aggressive emotional response in terms of long-term success. So learning to train ourselves to take that step back, to take that pause, and to be a little bit more contemplative and deliberate really makes such a huge difference in outcome in so many different aspects of people's lives.
Right. And when you think about it, we're thinking about it from our perspective. We're dealing with a human on the other side too, and
Mhm.
they're feeling the same pressures. And since the vast majority of people struggle in silence, most likely the other side is going to feel that same kind of pressure. And I've been in situations where simply injecting a little bit of silence gave me a lot more information that I bargained for. I might not have even been using it strategically in that moment, but but it worked. And
Yeah,
it's an incredible tool, because people feel compelled to fill that gap.
yeah. I've had situations where I'm mediating where I've taken notes and I'm just gathering my thoughts, and it's taking me a little longer than someone is comfortable with in terms of creating that silence. So I'm just looking over my notes. I'm not actively trying to elicit more information from the person, and I just get this verbal dump because I've taken 10 more seconds than they think I should be taking in terms of looking over my notes. And the information you get in those circumstances is just astounding and usually really useful and insightful.
Absolutely. And I think really for a lot of people, they would describe it as awkward. So
Mhm.
they get these feelings, oh, this is awkward, it's uncomfortable. Good. It means you're doing it right.
Right. Well, as the mom of 2 kids, I can tell you the term pregnant pause is a really, really valid term, because when you're 9 months pregnant, you're uncomfortable. And that term pregnant pause, it's loaded. It's going to bring forth a lot of information if you allow it to develop and grow.
I love it. That's great. And now let's talk about body language. Body language, very critical when it comes to reading people. But now, like you said, the vast majority of your mediations are happening on Zoom. So let's first talk about body language in general, but then let's talk about body language in the modern Zoom era.
Sure. Well, body language is something that I have used throughout my career, both as an attorney and as a mediator, to pick up on senses of discomfort, see if I can figure out whether or not people are receptive to a particular idea or a particular concept that's being floated. Back when I was taking depositions and trying cases, I would look for tells that people were uncomfortable with the answers that they were giving, and those are the times that I would dive in and press more. And it would be, it could be something very subtle. And the longer you spend with somebody, the easier it is for you to pick up on how they are feeling when they exhibit certain behaviors. So hands and feet. are often moved when people are feeling uncomfortable, which is why when I was a lawyer, I used to tell my witnesses, if you have to sit on your hands, sit on your hands, because that's a key tell. Shoulders, shrugging and gesturing and all of those kinds of things can also be really useful information. But we've lost a lot of that. Basically, we're looking at the neck up now. We can't really see what's happening with hands and feet and such in the Zoom era. So facial cues and facial expressions are so much more meaningful now than they ever have been, because you don't have those secondary cues that you can notice and pick up on out of the corner of your eye. Conversely, however, in the Zoom world, you are able to specifically pay attention to a person's face in a way that you haven't been able to before. Lots of judges are saying that they love hearing cases over Zoom because they can actually see a witness's face. When you think about the traditional courtroom setup, normally the witness is sitting usually to the right of the judge. And so the judge may be able to see a profile view, but cannot see a full facial view of a witness. So now when there's an evidentiary hearing going on or a trial occurring, the judge can see the full face of the witness. And they've said it really makes a difference in their ability to connect with people, even though they're doing it remotely, and in their ability to gauge what they believe to be credibility.
Wow, I did not think of that last one. That's really, really interesting. And it makes sense. It makes sense because, like you said, you're getting a better view of the facial expressions that somebody's making. When we think about body language, the book that comes to mind is What Everybody is Thinking by Joe Navarro, my favorite book on the topic. And one of the things that he says is, like you said, the further away that you get from the head, the more truthful the body becomes. Where you're getting to the hands and the feet, you can see the nervousness and whatnot. And usually when it comes to body language, if people are able to like pick up on their own body language and pull back, it's usually something that is in their face, because we lie with our face very often. And now you, as an expert mediator, I would be really interested to see, what are those subtle facial cues that you're looking for when you're having a mediation via Zoom?
There are a couple of things. I look right in the mouth area. And so I will look to the sides, and oftentimes you will see the corners of the mouth either pursing in or quirking up if someone is uncomfortable or has just said something that may not be truthful or 100% accurate. So that's one place. The other thing is narrowing of the eyes. That is a real tell for many people. Not everybody, everybody's different, but I've caught some people in real whoppers when I've noticed that their eyes are narrowing. They can't seem to keep their eyes wide open and lie at the same time.
Okay, now this is great. So you're using this as a tell to say, okay, potential deception. Now, once you recognize that, what is it that you do with that information?
I often will use that opportunity to press the person on whatever it is that they've just talked about, because typically it's we're talking the end game of a negotiation. They're telling me that they're at the limit of their authority. They're telling me that there's no way that they can stretch to X. And I can see that that's probably not accurate. And, that's when I really start to press on if we can get to here on the other side, do you think that would be a possibility? You don't have to answer me right now, but, is that a possibility if I can get them there? And oftentimes that yields really fruitful information.
I like that because it's showing you where you need to push a little bit more.
Exactly.
That's great. I forget which book it was. I think it might have been Thinking Fast and Slow, but they talked about if you look at somebody's pupils, the more constricted the pupil becomes, the more it demonstrates that they're thinking. And so with the narrowing of the eyes around there, it shows a little bit more thought. Because if I have $10,000 in the bank account and somebody's saying, we need $20,000, I'll just say, I know I can't do that. the math, the math there is really simple there. I don't need to think about that at all. But
Yep.
If somebody says, can you do $9,000? I'll squint a little bit. I'll think about it. No, I can't do that. You were thinking about it though.
Right. Yep.
Are you ready to take your business's marketing to the next level? Meet Brevo, the all-in-one marketing and CRM platform built to help you connect with customers, boost engagement, and grow your business smarter. With Brevo, you can manage all of your customer interactions in one place, nurture leads with their built-in CRM, and reach your audience through email and SMS, and keep them coming back with powerful automations. But here's where it gets really exciting. Meet Aura, Brevo's AI assistant. Aura helps you craft smarter campaigns by suggesting personalized content, optimizing send times, and even analyzing performance data to help you improve your strategy in real time. It's like having a marketing expert on your team 24/7. And of course, Brevo offers advanced analytics, seamless integrations, and AI-driven personalization. Everything you need to craft multi-channel campaigns that hit the mark every single time. Get started for free today or use code ANYTHING50 to save 50% on starter and standard plans for the first 3 months of an annual subscription. So just head to www.brevo.com/anything and take your marketing further with Brevo and Aura. We talk a lot on this show about the importance of learning and staying sharp. But let's be honest, between work and life, who actually has time to read every single book that can help you to get ahead? And that is exactly why I use Blinkist. It's an app that takes the world's best nonfiction books and breaks them down into 15-minute summaries that you can read or listen to. They have over 9,000 titles, so whether you're into leadership, psychology, or negotiation, they've got you covered. Personally, I love to learn about a wide variety of topics, not just negotiation, but psychology, history, and communication. All of that knowledge works together to help me to be the negotiator that I am today. If you've been meaning to dive into the frameworks we discuss here every week, Blinkist is the fastest way to get those core insights while you're driving to work or at the gym. It turns your extra time into a real advantage, helping you to show up to every difficult conversation with more clarity and courage. If you want to start learning faster and showing up with more confidence, this is the tool for you. Go to Blinkist.com/Kwame to start your free trial. That's Blinkist.com/Kwame.
No, and the other thing is a lot of people will touch their faces when they are uncomfortable. They will scratch their head, they will pull on their ears, they will, scratch their noses, they'll rub their hands across their eyes. So all of those things, bringing the hand to the face, can also be useful cues that they're uncomfortable in some way. You don't necessarily know why they're uncomfortable, but it definitely can let you know that you're working in an area where they're feeling pressured, uncertain, unsure of themselves in some way.
Yes. And I think that's a critical point too, because in a lot of the cases when we're analyzing body language, we don't know exactly what is happening, but we do know that something is happening. And so for me, I use it as a guide for my curiosity. When they were talking, they weren't touching their face before, but every time they talk about Martha or whatever, they keep on touching their face. Something's going on with Marsha. So I'm going to let me investigate a little bit more. And so it's really incredible to see how you're able to see that and then use it to guide your approach fluidly in the middle of a really high stakes situation.
Yeah, I love to use it as a guidepost to do really two things. First of all, it can cue me in when the parties are just emotionally overloaded and need a break. And particularly over Zoom, that occurs more frequently. I like to encourage people to get up, move around, get some fresh air, get some water, at least every hour, if not more frequently than that. Because let's face it, mediation is draining emotionally and physically. And over Zoom, it just adds another layer of the drain. So, I encourage people to move around. And if I start seeing them touching their face or, giving me those I'm uncomfortable signals and cues, then that's usually a really great time to take a break, even for 2 or 3 minutes, just so that they can move around. The other thing that I do is use it to dive deeper, as you were just talking about. I start asking them more questions, more why-based questions. So, you said this a few minutes ago. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Why is this your position? Tell me why. And that really can lead to some great information that can be useful further on down the line.
I love it. That is great. And then with the time we have left, I want to make sure we have ample time for segmentation, because I think this is something that's going to be a new concept for a lot of the listeners. And so when you're using the term segmentation in the context of a mediation or difficult conversation, what exactly does that mean?
Sure. It basically means breaking up the conversation into as many parts or as needed to make it a productive and fulsome conversation. So a typical scenario where this will work, and I'm handling on one of these cases right now, is a business divorce. Two partners who are in a situation where they're just not getting along. One wants to stay in, one wants to get out of the business. Clearly, when you're separating a business, there are a lot of issues that have to be discussed. How is the new business going to look? Who's going to be on the documents? If there's real estate involved, how are we disposing of the real estate? Is there debt involved? If so, how is that disposed of? Is there going to be a percentage of ownership that remains for the person who's exiting the business? And if so, for how long of a period of time? Who's getting paid what? That's a lot of issues to try and tackle in one fell swoop. So in a mediation that is segmented, what we will do is we'll say, okay, we're going to tackle this issue. On day one, we're talking only about this. And we'll talk about the real estate for a couple of sessions. And then we'll tackle something different in other sessions. And you can either do this one-on-one with, just one side of the case or the other side of the case, or you can do joint sessions with both sides addressing a single issue. So lots of ways to break it up. But the general idea is, let's turn this around into manageable bite-sized pieces of discussion and negotiation, rather than one enormous cluster of issues that could get derailed really, really quickly.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it would help to keep the conversation a lot more organized as well, right?
It helps keep things organized, and it also helps with that critical momentum, because as you know, when you're negotiating, the more things you can get people to agree upon, the easier it is to dispose of those issues that are thorny and tricky. So I love to front load the low-hanging fruit right off the bat. We'll start talking about the things that there really isn't going to be much fight about, and get 3 or 4 of those off the table so the parties really feel like they're moving forward. And if you can make those first 2 or 3 sessions super productive before getting into the stuff that is going to be a real issue, it really builds up some goodwill, and it builds up the ability and confidence in the mediator in particular that you're going to get it done.
I like this because I approach my difficult conversations, negotiations, whatever it happens to be, in the same way because of momentum. And momentum in conversations and momentum in sports is almost like this mysterious force that you can feel but not really fully understand. And so can you tell us a bit more about how momentum impacts these conversations in your experience?
Very definitely. If you start a conversation talking about the thing that is the most emotionally fraught and most difficult for people to deal with, you are going to end up never getting past that issue. If, however, you start talking about things that make the person feel comfortable, accepted, responsible, and like they're progressing forward, they're going to gain confidence in their own skills as a negotiator, in their own skills as an individual, and in your skills as the person who's in the middle of that discussion. So building that rapport, creating that sense of trust and community is huge. People want to cooperate. Fundamentally, we know that our survival is linked to one another. And if you can start to build on that common sense of community, then you can really get a long way with even the most difficult of discussions.
I like it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And so now we're seeing how segmentation can work in the mediation world and a little bit in negotiation. Let's talk about in just everyday difficult conversations with significant others, colleagues at work. How can you use segmentation in those everyday conversations?
Oh, that's a really great question. Well, if you think about a relationship between two partners, usually it's not just one thing that sets an argument or a difficult discussion off. It's usually an accumulation of small things. So for me, it's emptying the dishwasher, loading the dishes from the sink to the dishwasher, leaving dishes in places that bother me. And for my husband, it's things like I'm obsessive compulsive, and I so we've got these small little points of friction that, if we let them build up, become a much bigger discussion than it needs to be. Because fundamentally, it's really all about these small little points of friction. And if we segment the conversation into, okay, honey, yeah, I'm feeling frustrated with you today, and here are a few of the things that I'd like us to address. We don't have to deal with all of them today, but let's list the things that are bothering me that we need to fix, and are bothering you that we need to fix. Okay, what's the most important to you to address right away? You can start to chip away at those list of things that you need to solve as a unit, to create a more cohesive life going forward.
This is really great. And before you go, let me ask you this question, because you're very experienced in this. You have difficult conversations all the time. Do you find that your difficult conversations at home are more difficult for you to handle than the difficult conversations at work?
Oh, very definitely. There's no doubt about it. I am capable of having a really difficult conversation with just about anybody who isn't immediately related to me. And as soon as I am in that conversation with my 14 or 16-year-old, or my husband, or my parents or sister, all of my training goes right out the window, and I have to really, really, really try hard to center myself and engage in the conversation in a more productive way. I'm nowhere near as effective as when I'm mediating for other people, but with age and wisdom, hopefully comes at least a little bit better job at practicing what I preach.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I remember when I was mediating at the court, I told them, and I at the firm that I work for now too, I say, listen, give me the ugliest negotiations and mediations. That's fun for me. Let me get in there. I
Mhm.
love that. And then the most simple thing at home, I'm like, you want me to put my plate where the game's not over?
Oh yes, yep. No, it's funny. My 16-year old and I had an interesting discussion the other night about televisions and who got to use which television. And I wanted to use one television, and he wanted to use the same television. And I sat there and I'm like, what a stupid thing to be, upset and stressed about. But in the moment, it was stressing me out, because I had planned out that evening I was going to watch the Bruins game sitting on that particular couch, and he wanted to go on the PlayStation, and the PlayStation is connected to that TV. And I'm like, this shouldn't be bothering me, but it is. And it's just the way it is.
Well, this has been great. This is fantastic. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And before you go, let the listeners know about how they can get in touch with you and potentially work with you too.
Sure. I love working with people from around the country. Zoom is a wonderful thing. It allows me to connect with far more people than I ever was able to before. I can be reached most easily through my website, which is www.marianimediation, MarianiMediation.com. Make sure you type in mediation versus meditation. It might take you to some very interesting places if you don't get the mediation in there properly. So, but that's a great way to reach me. You can also email me, amariani@marianimediation.com, or you can call me at 617-279-0540.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, we will have links in the description of the episode. Amy, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you.
That was the first part of today's masterclass. Up next, we'll hear from another expert with a different approach, giving you even more strategies to add to your toolkit. Let's keep it rolling. Elaine, welcome to Negotiate Anything Live. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, for those who don't know, can you let us know a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah. Like Kwame, I am trained as a lawyer, and then that took me down this path of leadership development, ended up teaching skills, tools, frameworks for negotiation, difficult conversations, and feedback for more than a decade, which actually led me to this topic of silence.
Yes. So let's talk about it, because it's when you think about the legacy of negotiation and
Mm.
negotiation excellence, I think when we talk about negotiation skills or even just having difficult conversations in general, a lot of the literature is built upon a foundation that people are going to have these conversations. And for many people, that's just not the case.
Yeah, that embedded assumption, not just that we're going to have the conversation, but that we can also identify our own interests.
Yes. Go deeper on
So,
that.
how I got here was wait, we spend a tremendous amount of time, energy, and resources teaching people skills to negotiate. Some people still don't do it. Why is that? Despite really sound frameworks, despite training, why is that? And what I landed on was silence. We've each learned to stay silent at work often and in our relationships at home. We've been rewarded for staying silent, right? We keep the peace. We don't rock the boat. We are easy to work with. We are good team players if we stay silent. And so, if we want to actually negotiate, we need to wrestle and reckon with our relationship with silence and also be able to identify our needs rather than silence our own needs, our own interests, the ways that too often the parties around us silence us.
Mm. What I love about this is that you approach it from the perspective of this is a learned behavior. And I
Mhm.
think that's really powerful, which goes to the title of the book,
Yeah.
Unlearning Silence. And Elaine, I feel like we would be doing our audience here a disservice if we didn't use you as a perfect case study for this. So, can you tell the listeners about your background and your journey
Yeah.
to this realization? Because I think a lot of people would look at you and say, Harvard Association, Harvard trained
Mm,
lawyer, and
mm,
obviously good at this. She gets it, negotiation expert, right? So it must be easy for her. So I think if you can share a
mm.
little bit about your story, it'll help people to connect a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Never completely trust that what you see on social media or see from the outside is the whole story. Let's start there. Because there is what parts of ourselves do we see, there are what parts of ourselves do we gravitate toward. So, my own story is that I'm the youngest daughter in an immigrant family from Taiwan. That in an Asian culture, you show respect by giving deference to your elders, by not pushing back. Even asking a question is disrespectful at times. So I was very, in Mandarin, the term is guai, like very well behaved, follow those rules, very respectful. But what it teaches you over time is that you don't actually have needs of your own. That if you have needs, in negotiation speak, we would call those interests. You are needy, which we don't want to be needy. That's not rewarded in society. And of course, being female, being a mother, I'm supposed to be self sacrificial. I'm supposed to be considerate. I'm supposed to be unflappable and do everything with a smile. At least that's what life on Instagram tells me I should be. And so, where in all of that is there room for me? I also grew up professionally teaching concepts out of getting to yes and difficult conversations and doing that worldwide and thinking actually my value of what I added as a facilitator was only related to the concepts I was teaching rather than the person I was.
When I started this podcast and built the American Negotiation Institute, I quickly realized something. No one hands you a manual. You're the strategist, the marketer, the operations team, and the tech department all at the same time. Every day, there's a new decision, a new problem, and a new hat to wear. Starting something of your own can feel exciting and lonely. And looking back, having the right tools makes all the difference. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses all around the world and 10% of e-commerce in the United States, from brands just getting started to major household names. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you to build a beautiful online store that matches your brand. It's packed with AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography, helping you to move faster and more efficiently. You can create email and social media campaigns to reach customers wherever they're scrolling, and you can manage everything in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics, without juggling multiple platforms. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/Kwame. Go to shopify.com/Kwame. That is shopify.com/Kwame. As a self-employed business owner, my family depends on me. I think a lot about how I'm going to provide for them, how I'm going to build the business, and how I'm going to support Whitney and the boys. But I had a moment recently where I asked myself a harder question. If something unexpected happened to me, would my family be okay financially? And that's why I got serious about term life insurance and why I looked into Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life is term life insurance you can get done today, and it's made for busy parents, all online, on your schedule, right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. If you have kids, and especially if you're young and healthy, now is the time to lock in low rates. And even if you already have life insurance through your employer, it might not be enough to fully protect your family, and it probably won't follow you if you leave your job. Fabric has flexible, high-quality policies that fit your family and your budget. We're talking $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/Kwame. That's meetfabric.com/Kwame. MEET fabric.com/Kwame. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
So everyone says you write the book that you needed when you were younger. I would say I wrote Unlearning Silence because it is the book that I need now and that I continue to need. Unlearning Silence is a journey, but this journey of writing the book has taught me that I actually do have a voice. I do have thoughts that can influence the people around me, influence the relationships I'm in, and fundamentally influence the world around me.
This is great. And what we see here, listeners, is that there's an element of culture, a strong gender dynamics here too. And we might just stop at the culture of Taiwan versus the United States, but then you have to think about the Ivy League culture. You have to think about the culture within the negotiation community, because I know that I've felt a little bit of pressure sometimes to align to some of the more dominant forces when it comes to how negotiation is taught, the different methodologies, the tactics, the strategies, and the energy you bring to the conversation. And you come from a legacy, just from that Harvard program on negotiation, a very strong legacy with very robust rules and expectations for how negotiation should be taught. And so I really want to zone in on this, because I think there's a deeper level here that I think can be really inspirational to the folks listening to this show, because it takes a lot of courage to be able to step out of that realm and do things your own way, because there might be some stigma in the negotiation industry to say, oh, wait, you're a negotiator, but you're afraid to talk. So can you go deeper into that element of unlearning silence?
Yeah, I would say that the fear can always be there. And it is so often people say you need to have more courage, you need to have more confidence, essentially fix yourself, then you would get the promotion, then you would be an effective negotiator. And my analysis and understanding across industries, across geographies, and my own lived experience is it's not just about courage or confidence, it's about calculation. Is it worth it to me to say something, to negotiate? And the beautiful thing about calculation is that we, as parties to the negotiation, can influence someone else's calculation. If you knew that your manager, your spouse, your colleague would hear you when you shared your perspective, not only would they hear you, but they would respect you and they would reward you for sharing what you thought. How different then would your calculation be? How much more likely would you be to actually show up authentically or unfiltered to add your thoughts, so that we're not just getting the loudest thoughts in our conversations at work, but the best ones? I will also say that I see this work, Unlearning Silence, as part of the legacy of the program on negotiation of continuous learning, right? The canon was never supposed to be static. The canon was never supposed to be, here is how you negotiate, the end, we're done. It's how do we continue to all get better at our craft? And there are ways in which different voices aren't always represented in that canon. So I'll pop in two things. If people haven't read Whitney Benz's article or interview with Alonzo Emery in ABA, the dispute resolution section, a couple years ago on negotiation, it really challenges, why do we listen to certain people in terms of negotiation advice, but we don't listen to other people? And where are our sources of collective wisdom? Where are we drawing them from? And also plug Damali Peterman's book that is coming out in a couple of months, Negotiating While Black, which really bucks this trend of mimic me as the prescriptive prescription for negotiation, and says our uniqueness is our superpower. So lots of different resources out there to continue this legacy of continuous learning.
That is great for multiple reasons. Selfishly, because now I just got some more podcast guests. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And she's funny.
This is good. I love that. The audience loves that too. And I think for us, all of us can look at this and recognize there are some embedded assumptions that we have just absorbed as truth in our lives. And so whether it is in a difficult conversation, we assume that people aren't going to take us seriously, or we assume that they're not going to listen, or in our careers, we assume that our unique contribution, since we haven't heard it from anybody else in this particular way, means that it is some way invalid. It helps us to challenge those assumptions and recognize, wait a second, there is some validity too. And I also think there is an assumption that if we shoot our shot, if we have these conversations, if we let ourselves be heard, the consequences would be so dire that we won't be able to recover. Can you speak a little bit to that one?
I want to start with the assumptions that we've internalized. We didn't just make them up. So for anyone who's starting to blame or self-flagellate, right? Like, oh, it's my fault. It's not your fault. Right? These are the messages that we receive day in, day out, sometimes from childhood up until now, often daily from our managers, from our coworkers. There is such gravity within an organization, within a team, to mimic, to conform. And often the advice around influencing is look and sound like other people, because research shows that we're more likely to want to work with, would more likely to like someone, and more likely to say yes to someone who looks and sound like us. So it's not just that we made it up, that we would end up feeling like silence, either silencing ourselves or keeping our mouths shut, is the safer or more beneficial option. It makes sense why silence is a survival tactic in so many work contexts. And I want to highlight that unlearning silence isn't just about unlearning our own silence. It is also a call to well-intentioned leaders to say, in what ways might I be unintentionally silencing the very people I claim and aim to support? That's chapters 5 and chapters 9 of the book, of that awareness and that action. But all of that is to acknowledge that we all together are in a contributive system. I cannot say that it is just on Kwame to find and use his voice, because whether he finds and uses it is related to how I treat him, how I show up for him, whether I challenge or perpetuate the operating assumptions that he has from operating in this world.
What I love about that is that it helps us to recognize the bigger picture, and recognize also how after we get to this point where we feel more comfortable speaking, how then we could use our voice to empower other people. And when you think about it through the systemic perspective, we can recognize, oh, wait, now I can use these negotiation skills to create positive change in my organization and my community in a way that allows other people to feel more comfortable letting their voice be heard as well.
Totally. Silence breeds silence. The more we see other people staying silent, the more we see them not negotiating, right? We look at an organizational system. If you are new to the system, if you are more junior, we inherently look around and say, how do things work around here? Because I don't want to be the one to step out of line. I don't want to be the one to dip my toe into who knows what. And so I'm observing to see, do other people push back here? Those EVPs, do they push back on the CEO or not? Is that appropriate here? Is that rewarded here? And our brains often subconsciously do the calculation of, oh, it's not worth it. But if silence breeds silence, voice also breeds voice. The more we see people pushing back, asking questions, and that there is a positive response, the more it is normed, the more it is normalized. So each of us have a contribution to whether we are building a culture of silence or a culture of voice on our teams, in our organizations, and in this world.
Now, let's say, hypothetically, there's
I love
somebody out here listening saying, you know what, Elaine, I realized I have been silencing myself and I want to unlearn silence.
Mm-hmm.
Other than buying your book, which should be the next step,
Yeah.
how do we operationalize this?
Yeah, I love that question. Please do buy the book because I'm going to give you step one. I'll give you step 1 and 2, and then there's a reason there's a book to follow it up and really operationalize it. So I want you to have that richness and context and support. Step 1 is to accurately diagnose the situation. So often not being heard has been diagnosed as you're not speaking up enough or in the right way, right? Going back to you're not courageous enough, you need more confidence, you need more assertiveness, go fix yourself. Versus there's this thing called silence that we've all learned and that we often all perpetuate. And so, what assumptions have I internalized over time about who gets to speak, about what's appropriate? What of those things have I verified in my current context and system? And which of those are legacy from my old team, my own old workplace? So, step 1 is awareness, which is why the first half of the book is structured as awareness. And step 2 is action. The first action step would be to recultivate your voice. If you're wondering, do I have a voice? What does my voice sound like? Right? I've been so busy and so consistent and so rewarded for solving for what does my manager want, or what does leadership want, or what's the party line, that I forget I might even have unique value add thoughts of my own. The first question I would ask myself in any conversation, and this is internal work, is really just, what do I think? Not what does my manager think, not what does my mom think, not what does my spouse want me to think, but what do I think? And just notice that, right? As you're listening to my conversation with Kwame right now, what do you think? What's your reaction? What's coming up for you? And in asking that question repeatedly, you recultivate the notion and the awareness that you have your own voice, that you have your own perspective. And then you get to the decision of when, where, and how, if you want to share that with other people.
I love this step of asking yourself, what do I think?
Mm.
And the reason I love it is because it seems so obvious that people overlook it. So there's a lot of profundity behind that question, not only in the nuance that can be discovered through asking that question and truly exploring it, but also by exploring why it is that we don't truly take the time to ask ourselves what we want. Can you get into that a little bit?
Well, because it's scary, Kwame. Right? And we are on high alert for anything that is fearful, that has fear, that has uncertainty, particularly in this day and age. Right? This call and this invitation to unlearning silence is fundamentally disruptive, not just to our teams and our relational dynamics, but to me. And if we are all moving through the world at hyperspeed, who has time to open up a can of worms that actually is messy about what messages I might have internalized? And so at some level, it is more efficient in the short term to go through the world on autopilot. We know how to do that. We click into the next meeting, done, check. We reply to that email, done, check. Now, there's short-term benefit to that, but I'd argue that there is long-term cost. Because the question for me and the invitation to each of us is, what life do we want to live? Right? How do we want to use our voice for leadership and life? And that our voice is not just the words that we say in a meeting, but it is how we move through the world. It is where we put energy toward what are the causes, what is the output, what is the impact that we are looking for. All of that takes reflection, takes at a minimum a pause to even ask the question. It is fundamentally uncomfortable, but also has the potential to be incredibly rewarding.
Yes, yes, and I can definitely respect and appreciate the fact that it can be scary, because I know for me, I'm thinking about in my life, the thing that is challenging about introspection is that you might not always like what you find. And then you feel obligated. Oh man, now that I found this, I have to do something about it. It's a lot easier to, to just pretend like everything is okay and just keep on floating, even though we recognize that sometimes we're floating over that cliff. But
Yeah.
at this moment, in this time, I'm
Yeah.
still floating. I know it's not going to take me to a good place, but let me worry about that later.
Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance exists for a reason. I don't want to believe, and this is based on a data set that is qualitative research, and don't think most people would say, I want to move through the world in ignorance or, just floating in my hypothetical world. It, if we put it in really practical terms, is also short-term bias, right? Where we're focused on the short term versus the long term, and yet impact is measured in the long term. Impact is also happening in the short term, but is also the question of, are we having the impact that we want? So I'd argue and break it down in the book that it doesn't have to be this deep-seated, navel-gazing, multi-day long silent retreat. It is literally in your next meeting, in your next Zoom call, starting to ask the question to yourself, what do I think? And then you get to make the choice of whether you share it, because silence is at work. Whether or not we admit it, whether or not we acknowledge it, is impacting us. It is impacting the people around us. The difference between silence that is additive or oppressive is agency. So what choices are you making today? Are they conscious choices or unconscious choices? Either way, the choice is up to you, and you're actually making one.
I really appreciate that you've made this so actionable
Mm.
and also so achievable, because you're right. If you say, okay, well, do I need to go on a meditation retreat and achieve self-actualization in order to accomplish this? Then
Does it get me away from my kid for a little bit? If so, sign me up, but that's not realistic.
exactly, exactly. And that's what's so great about this,
Yeah.
because this resonates with us in different ways, in different reasons, in probably in different capacities within our lives. Because I'd love you to speak to the compartmentalization that happens in our lives, where we might be comfortable allowing ourselves to be heard in one aspect of our lives, but in another aspect, we might really struggle. And that juxtaposition of different outcomes and different inputs can be really challenging. And so just recognizing and appreciating the fact that everybody deals with this, and then recognizing and appreciating the fact that the first step can and probably should be quite small, is really empowering.
Mm. Let me go a step further, which is to be really clear, because as lawyers, we like to, for the avoidance of doubt, unlearning silence is not about saying everything all the time to everyone. The world is too noisy and complex for that. But unlearning silence is being intentional and conscious of when we're choosing or utilizing silence, or when it is chosen and imposed upon us. So chapter 3 of the book is actually an entire chapter called When Silence Makes Sense.
If you're leading a lot of meetings, or if you're in meetings back to back all day, you know how mentally demanding that can be. You're trying to stay present, you're contributing, you're thinking strategically, but part of your brain is also tracking action items, decisions, and follow-ups. That's why our team uses Granola. Granola is an AI-powered notepad built for the way real people actually meet. Here's how it works. You take rough notes like you normally would, and in the background, Granola securely transcribes the meeting, and when it ends, it turns everything into clean, structured notes that are actually useful. And what I appreciate the most is that it works through your device's audio. It integrates seamlessly into the video conferencing tools that you already use, and there's no complicated setup. It just fits into your workflow. Granola doesn't replace you in the meeting, it augments you. It lets you lean in, focus, and listen deeply while still walking away knowing exactly what was deciding, who owns what, and what comes next. Before Granola, our team would spend extra time cleaning up notes and double-checking details. Now, we leave meetings aligned and clear. It saved us time and helps us to operate at a much higher level. If meetings are eating up your day, Granola is a no-brainer. You can actually try it completely free for 3 months. Just head to granola.ai/Kwame. That's granola.ai/Kwame to get your time back. Get 3 months free at granola.ai/Kwame.
We know that our workplaces in this world is complex. We know that for many of us, silence is a strategy for survival. Silence is also essential for self-care to make it through to the next day. And to not let that silence, that utility of silence, give ourselves a pass for living out the values that we hold, for influencing the world toward the way that we want to see it become.
And I can hear a lot of people breathing a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Saying,
Or the avoidance of doubt. Rewind, listen again. Let's be really clear about what we're saying and what we're not saying.
Yes, it's so important because I think these messages can become overbroad when you don't have that specificity, because it can be disempowering for two extreme ways. So it could be disempowering saying, wow, I need to say everything that's on my mind. That's impossible. I guess I'm doomed to be silent forever.
We
Or
don't have
it can be-
energy or bandwidth for that. And
No, it's
also,
not-
we don't want to be like those people who are already too loud and dominating the conversation.
Exactly. It's not a lifestyle that we even want to have. And then let's say somebody says, you know what? I'm going to live that lifestyle. And we do it for a while. And then we realize, wait, I have unmuted myself to the extreme and I don't enjoy it and nobody else does and everything got worse. So there has to be that middle ground.
Totally. And let me, if I haven't already, be clear or repeat a definition. Voice is not just the words that you use in a meeting. Voice is how you move through the world. And so this applies across lines of introversion, extroversion. This applies in terms of whether you are more inclined and more able to speak in real time, talk in real time versus text or type. So often in our workplaces, the ability to speak in 3 succinct bullet points with no ums, with just the right amount of emotion that it seems like you care, but not too much emotion that you lose credibility. And by the way, if you're femme presenting, you also need to smile, but not too much, really limits our ability to hear each other. If the prerequisite for sharing your thoughts, insights, your intel is to sound like that, we are going to, as leaders, miss out on essential information. And the value proposition for well-intentioned leaders of not missing out on that information is that if you're not hearing your people, you are living in a skewed sense of reality. Remember, ignorance was bliss. That's what you're choosing. It's blissful until it blows up. Let's have the conversation now so we have the opportunity to course correct.
Absolutely. And folks who are out there listening live, I see you in the chat. Remember, you can ask questions. We see what you're saying. So if you have any questions for Elaine, let us know because we want to engage with you as much as possible. That really lifts this up. And we have a comment here. This is an incredibly brilliant topic. The book sounds like a must-have. I couldn't have said it any better myself. This is great. And Elaine, one of the things that I really appreciate about your voice in this industry is that you are unique and you lean into that authenticity. And one of the things that I realize is that it's really hard for people to do that. We hear all of these messages about be yourself. And the reason why we keep hearing it is because it is so profoundly hard to be ourselves in a world that is sending us messages telling us that we're not enough or we should conform. So in your life, how have you found your authentic voice and found the confidence and courage to let it be heard?
This is where I say I wrote the book that I needed, because even in this process, it has been coaching me toward my aspirational self rather than the self I sometimes wake up feeling like. And it came down to a calculation of I can continue to try to be a good or even great imitation of someone else, or I could actually just be me. And I realize that that often is a radical act in circles and in contexts in which authenticity and vulnerability are luxury goods for people with privileged identities. But if I have one life to live, then how can I normalize different voices to build that culture of voice, because voice inspires voice. So you see me on LinkedIn doing things for the first time that I never thought I'd do. I'm an educator. I'm a facilitator. I apparently am a writer. But filming reels, right? Having like filming an unboxing video, I have a whole storyline about that because it's awkward and it's different. But even to notice in the moment, where is this contextualized? Oh, I'm doing something new. And because I'm doing something new, it is awkward, it is uncomfortable. That's just part of the calculation. But I came to the same calculation that, let me back up. I think people say to me, Elaine, you're so courageous. I don't really see it that way. I appreciate what I hear in the intent there. For me, it's a calculation of I have incredible opportunity from the places I have worked, from the school that I went to, from Penguin Random House betting on this book, right? Women of color don't get book deals from traditional publishers very often. And if you Google leadership books, best leadership books, it is all white men, and then maybe Brene Brown on page one, depending on which browser you're using. So to me, to have this opportunity is one that I'm deeply humbled by and want to make good on the opportunity, right? We shoot our shots to say, I think there's something here that has helped clients believe that they are not the problem, and to see a way forward that is more than just do it or have more confidence. If we can see the situation more accurately, we can solve it more effectively. And we started this conversation by talking about a compelling reason for a book. My reason for this book is wanting belonging, dignity, and justice for every single human being. My reason and my hope for this book is that it helps those of us who have long been silenced by the people around us and the systems we're part of to feel seen, known, and heard. It is also an invitation to well-intentioned leaders, which I believe is all of us, to show up more with that positive impact rather than some of the negative disconnects that we so often experience. So that's my hope. That's my invitation, and invite everyone to join us on this journey of unlearning silence.
Ooh, and we are on board, Elaine. And that was so powerful that there's a part of me that wants to let that be the conclusion, but I refuse because there's a
Because
question.
you're using your voice.
There is a question here.
Love
So Jeanette says, what tips do you have for being able to speak up at meetings and not be interrupted? Ooh, Elaine, this is a tricky one.
I love this question. Let's start with norms, because what I hear in there and is always embedded in the question is, what can I do? What can I do so other people behave better? Let me start by saying it's not you, it's on them. Now, there's a cultural component with great research of how much overlap different cultures have in speaking over each other or how much space you need to leave. So you can look into that further. But the places I'd go are actually process pieces. So process is how we have our conversations. One is, do we normalize not interrupting people? And if that is just a group norm of how we operate, then it's actually not on you. The second is, this is a call for allies to say, hey, I want to hear what Jeanette has to say. Let her finish. Right? So that you don't have to be doing the disrupting in the moment. Those two, the norms and the allyship of someone else doing the disrupting, to me are the most powerful pieces based on who's in the conversation. If you look at the Obama administration, they had a pact amongst women in attribution of ideas so that other people wouldn't steal, men wouldn't steal their ideas and claim them as theirs. I think same thing here of how do we show up for each other to say, I want to hear what Jeanette has to say, let her finish so that Jeanette doesn't have to do it in the moment. And if we're each doing that for each other, then we collectively build that norm, but also take the pressure off of ourselves.
Oh, that's powerful. Powerful. And let's put up that comment from Terry, too. I really like what Terry said there, Simone. I think collectively, as women in America, we're starting to realize that we have the same right to speak as men and are pushing back to men in a room who feel they have more of a right to speak. And I think that's powerful. I think it's a growing trend. And speaking as a man here, who wants to be an ally, I think there are a lot of men who struggle with allyship because they're struggling with balancing being an ally with also the fear of sounding patronizing. And so if there's a man in a room who wants to be an ally, who sees Jeanette speaking up in a meeting and then people continuously interrupting, how could a man stand up and be an ally in that situation while doing it a way that doesn't seem patronizing to the women in the room?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what we just talked about, which is, hold on, I want to hear that person finish. It actually doesn't matter what gender the person is, although we know that interruption happens disproportionately to women, but the intervention is the same, which is really, hold on. Or can we go back to that idea? Let's go back to that idea because that was really interesting to me. So there's that in the moment intervention of pause. I want to hear what Jeanette has to say. That's personal, right? I am taking up space as a man or as a woman or non-binary, right? I want to hear what they have to say. So stop the conversation. That's just a process move. For those of us who are mediators, that is a process move of who gets to speak when, in what order. It's not attached to gender. And then the other is using your social capital. So I get this question a lot, particularly with English second language folks, right? And I have empathy for this because you're thinking in a different language and still translating, and often penalized because you don't fit into that mold that we described of what voice and leadership is supposed to sound like in corporate America. The move for allies here is to say, I've invited Joelle to this meeting because she has, or they have, the most nuanced take on this topic I've ever heard. You are giving them the platform wrapped up in your endorsement, lending your social capital. So often people say, I feel so badly for my colleague. They're not getting invited to the meeting. I'm empathizing with them in my office. Okay, great. That private empathy is nice. We get a little bit of oxytocin, but better is public endorsement.
That's powerful. And I think my question also demonstrates an embedded assumption as well that there could be, and I guess there is a wrong way to do this for sure. But I think the over-analysis in the moment can hold us back from being an ally because a lot of times these conversations move very quickly and then you can sit there and get stuck with this analysis and then the time has moved on. And so I think it's, for me especially, it's very empowering to recognize that removing gender from the analysis in this case can help us to be an ally because this is something that everybody deals with to a certain extent. But like you said, the studies and lived experience demonstrates that women experience it more.
Yeah.
And when we think about this as a process and we think about this as norms and culture, we recognize that culture evolves and it changes, especially as we introduce more diversity into spaces. Yeah. In order to be more inclusive, there have to be some micro shifts that move in order for people to not feel unintentionally alienated in the workplace. Yeah. And so what advice do you have for somebody who wants to actually negotiate that process where they're in a conversation and they say, you know what, let's slow things down. What is how do we approach these conversations? Is interrupting okay? Let's get this on the table. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you've got a couple of levers. Let me also go back to the in the moment overthinking it because the spotlight effect is real and impacts us across gender, right? Whatever our gender and identity. Most of us think spotlight effect, meaning we think more about ourselves than most other people do about us. So we're sitting there overthinking it. No one else really notices. Are there bad ways to say it or worse ways to say it? Sure. But the goal isn't to come up with the perfect way. Perfectionism is another way that we silence ourselves, so much as what's the next experiment? What is a way? And okay, it didn't come out exactly the way you wanted it. You can also recover from that, right? Particularly if you're a white male and you have more privilege in that context. What's your next step? What is the recovery after the experiment? So it's not a one-shot deal, right? It's not shoot your shot and then you lose it. Going back to norms, what are the ways of establishing those norms? A couple of levers are just on our team. What are the group norms that we're building? So often in team building exercises, people come up with team norms of operating agreements, right? How are we going to work together? That is a stake in the ground that says this is our aspirational way of working with each other. And it gives us an anchor to go back to. So when someone violates it, then you can say, hey, don't we have that norm of this seemed inconsistent? What would we do differently? Or have we evolved the norm? The thing about process is to realize that there's always a process happening. And if we don't actively design the process, we default to the process, the preferences, the patterns, the habits of the people with the most organizational and institutional power. Those meetings that are so painful for everybody, that don't seem to have an agenda and aren't productive, they happen because we didn't design the meeting. So I would argue that everyone actually has the standing or the right to say, hey, could we do this? Or what about that? And to use your preferred communication medium. So that could be emailing ahead of time to say, let's try something new. Or in the meeting to say, hey, what if we pause here? Or, we've been going at this for a while. Can we take a break? And when we come back for the break, let's start here. Often we delegate that role of meeting facilitation to the person we think owns the meeting. And often they don't actually think they own the meeting. So then no one's really managing the meeting. No one's leveraging this incredibly powerful tool of designing the process of how we work together. So in the book, I talk about 3 levers for voice that often when we think about using your voice, we're thinking about what do I have to say? What is the substance, the terms and conditions of the negotiation? Well, we miss out on the lever of relationship. We can talk about that. And we miss out on the lever of process, which again, in the mediation context, you're hiring someone to do that. But even if you're not in a formal mediation with a mediator, professional mediator you've hired, you can leverage the same tools to fundamentally influence the outcome of the negotiation and the conversation because you're paying attention to it and influencing it.
I love that. This is great. And Elaine, there's one question I've been hesitating to ask this one. I think This is the toughest one. Okay. So Let's say there's somebody in the audience who's really struggling with this and they've listened to this and everything's resonating with them. What book would you recommend that they read to help them take the next step?
This feels like a trap question, but I'm going to answer it as honestly as I know how.
You better answer it the right way.
Okay, this feels like a test. There's a book that I wrote called Unlearning Silence: How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. It is really written and intended as prescriptive nonfiction so that we each unlearn the ways we silence ourselves, the things that we can influence and control, and an invitation to all well-intentioned leaders to actually start supporting the people you lead rather than silencing them. Kwame, did I get the answer right?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is great. Elaine, thank you so much. That's the power of a masterclass. One topic, multiple lenses, and real-world application. Negotiation isn't theory, it's practice, it's self-awareness, it's choosing courage over comfort. So pick one insight today and apply it in your next conversation, because skill doesn't come from listening, it comes from doing. I'll catch you in the next one. Hey, If you're still here, that means you really like this episode. So why don't you leave us a review? 5 stars, please. That really means the world to us, and it helps other people find the show. And now, I will catch you later.